She told me, "If you can't take care of me, what's the point?" So I walked away, let her chase money, and watched karma hit back. Toxic relationship breakup, gold digger story. I never thought I'd be the guy writing something like this, but here I am. At 34, I've had my share of relationships, some good, some bad, but none quite like this one. Looking back, I realized just how blind I was in the beginning. This isn't just a breakup story. It's about how easy it is to confuse love with attention, and how painful it is to discover that someone's affection might come with a hidden price tag. It started a couple of years ago at a small gathering in New York. A friend had invited me, and honestly, I wasn't expecting much more than casual conversation and maybe a few drinks. That's when I met Sophie, not her real name. She was striking in a way that made people notice the moment she walked into a room. Her confidence wasn't loud or overbearing, but it was the kind that seemed to draw people toward her naturally. What caught me off guard was how quickly she zeroed in on me. Within minutes, we were talking like old friends. She laughed at my jokes, leaned in when I spoke, and asked questions about my life that made me feel like I was the only person there. I remember leaving that night thinking I'd hit some kind of jackpot. Our first few weeks of dating were nothing short of thrilling. We'd meet at rooftop bars, explore new restaurants, and even take short weekend trips. I've always been the type who doesn't mind picking up the tab, partly because that's how I was raised. Be generous. Don't make money the centerpiece of a relationship. At the time, I didn't think twice about it. If anything, I wanted to impress her. Sophie never outright demanded anything, but there was always this unspoken expectation. She didn't reach for the check, didn't suggest splitting, and I told myself, maybe she's just old-fashioned. Maybe she likes a guy who takes care of things. It didn't feel unreasonable then. But even in those early days, there were red flags I brushed aside. Small comments, little expressions, things that didn't sit quite right if I thought too long about them. Still, I ignored them because the high of being wanted was stronger than the whisper of doubt in the back of my head. For instance, when we went out, it was always to trendy, photogenic places. Never quiet coffee shops or cozy diners. Always somewhere she could dress up for. She loved taking pictures of the food, the drinks, the skyline views, and she'd post them on Instagram. I noticed she almost never tagged me or included me in the pictures. It was about the setting, not about us. But instead of questioning it, I told myself it was harmless. The thing is, those early months were intoxicating. It felt like I was living in a movie where the beautiful woman actually chose me, and I didn't want to do anything to mess it up. So I overlooked the signs. I told myself that real relationships take time to settle in, that people open up gradually, and that maybe I just needed to be patient. Now, sitting here writing this, I realize how much of that was me convincing myself to stay comfortable in the illusion. I wanted so badly for it to be love that I ignored the possibility it was something else entirely. And that's where it all began. What seemed like the start of something special, but was really just the opening act to a lesson I never wanted to learn. The first red flag I remember clearly came about a month into dating. We were sitting at this upscale spot she'd picked, and out of nowhere, she leaned in with a playful smile and asked, "So how much do you make again? You must be doing well with all these nice places." She said it like a joke, but it lingered in my mind longer than I wanted to admit. I laughed it off, pretending it was nothing. I told myself it was harmless curiosity, but deep down, it didn't feel right. I should have asked myself why she cared so much about that side of me so early on. Then there was the night my mom called while we were out at dinner. It wasn't an emergency, just one of those check-in calls moms like to make. I answered quickly, thinking it would only take a minute. Sophie rolled her eyes, sighed loudly, and whispered, "Ugh, can't that wait? You're with me." It stung, but instead of confronting it, I brushed it aside. I told myself she just wanted my full attention. I wanted to see it as a sign she cared, not that she was dismissive of people who mattered to me. The reality was, I was falling hard for her. And when you're falling that hard, logic takes a back seat. The small things that would normally set off alarms just feel like quirks you're supposed to accept. My emotional investment blinded me to behaviors I would have flagged instantly in anyone else. I started noticing a pattern in how she spent her time with me. Sophie always wanted to go out. Never once did she suggest just hanging out at my place, making dinner together, or having a quiet night in. The only time we stayed in was when it was at her apartment, where everything still felt like it revolved around her world, her comfort. She was also obsessed with social media. Our dates weren't really about us. They were about the image of us. She'd post photos of the restaurants, the wine glasses, the skyline views, but never of the two of us together. I became more of a backdrop to the lifestyle she wanted to showcase than an actual partner in her life. One evening still sticks with me, probably because it was the moment I first felt something heavy in my gut. It had been a brutal week at work, and all I wanted was a night in. I texted her that I was drained and suggested ordering takeout, Maybe watching a movie. Something low-key, just the two of us. She looked at me like I had suggested the most ridiculous thing in the world. Babe, she said flatly. I already told my friends we were going out tonight. I can't just cancel. Besides, it'll be fun, you'll feel better. I remember sitting there, half exhausted, trying to convince myself she was right. That maybe pushing through my fatigue for her was the loving thing to do. But that little voice in the back of my mind whispered something else. She's not hearing you. She's not meeting you where you are. Still, I went. I paid. I smiled through it. And she laughed with her friends while I quietly felt out of place. That was the first night I couldn't quite shake the thought that maybe we weren't on the same page at all. But I didn't walk away. I told myself all relationships have compromises. I thought love meant sacrificing a little, and that if I just kept giving, eventually things would balance out. What I didn't realize yet was that I wasn't just compromising. I was setting the stage for a relationship where the balance would always tip in one direction. So I went. I paid. And I ignored that sinking feeling in my gut. That became the rhythm of our relationship. Me pushing aside the little doubts, her setting the pace, and me following along because I was already too invested to admit something was off. I kept telling myself this was just what dating looked like now. People go out, you spend money, and eventually it evens out when things get serious. I wanted to believe that. Looking back now, I can see it for what it really was. I wasn't just paying for dinners, drinks, and weekend trips. I was paying for the illusion of being loved. It wasn't a conscious transaction, but that's exactly what it turned into. Every time I swiped my card, I wasn't just buying a meal or an experience. I was buying a piece of the fantasy I didn't want to lose. I thought if I just held on a little longer, things would change. Maybe once she felt more secure, she'd relax. Maybe once we were more serious, the focus would shift from going out to actually building something real. That's the lie I told myself. Keep giving, keep investing, and it'll eventually pay off. But here's the truth I couldn't see back then. Once you've poured that much of yourself, time, money, emotions, into someone, walking away feels impossible. It feels like throwing away everything you've worked for. That's the trap. You're not staying because it's healthy. You're staying because you've convinced yourself you can't start over again. At the time, I didn't even see myself as being used. The word never crossed my mind. If anything, I thought I was lucky. I had this beautiful, confident woman who chose me out of all the people she could have had. I told myself that was worth the effort, worth the sacrifices. But deep down, something didn't sit right. On nights when I was alone, I'd think about how little she ever gave back. Not just financially, but emotionally. I was always the one reaching out first, the one making plans, the one holding everything together. Whenever I was tired, stressed, or wanted something low-key, it always turned into me compromising for her vibe, her plans, her world. The honeymoon phase was ending, and those cracks I'd ignored in the beginning started to widen. What felt like love in the beginning was slowly turning into a transaction, even if I couldn't admit it yet. The spark between us wasn't about who we were together. It was about what I could provide, the lifestyle I could maintain, and the image she could project. I remember one night after another expensive outing, lying in bed and staring at the ceiling. She was next to me, scrolling on her phone, laughing at some Instagram video, and I thought, does she even see me? Or just what I give her? But the thought scared me, so I buried it. I told myself I was being paranoid, maybe even insecure. I convinced myself love requires patience, and that I just needed to hold on a little longer. What I didn't realize yet was how expensive that patience was going to be, not just in money, but in self-respect. That was the reality creeping in. I wasn't her partner, I was her provider. I just wasn't ready to face it. The cracks that had started to show in the early months eventually split wide open. What I once thought was love began to reveal itself as something far more transactional. Around 6 months in, Sophie's hints turned into clearer requests. It started small. She'd say things like, "You know, my friends' boyfriends take them shopping sometimes. It's kind of sweet." Other times, it was, "I really need a new bag for work, but I don't know if I can afford it right now." The first time, I thought it was harmless. I told myself I was being thoughtful, supportive even. So I bought the bag. Then came the shoes. Then little treats that weren't so little. Each time, she thanked me, but it was more like she was checking off a list than being genuinely surprised. It crept up slowly enough that I didn't notice the shift. I thought I was being a good boyfriend, doing the kind of things people in love do for each other. But looking back, there was nothing mutual about it. She never once offered to cover dinner, never surprised me with something small, never showed in action that she wanted to give back. The turning point for me came with the Miami trip. It was supposed to be our first real vacation together. I was excited, imagining the two of us exploring a new city, enjoying some sun, and finally having time away from the constant busyness of New York. I booked the flights, the hotel, everything. She showed up at the airport with 3 massive suitcases. When I raised an eyebrow, she just laughed and said, "What can I say? I need options." At the time, I forced a smile. But that trip told me more about her than the past 6 months combined. Every day was about appearances. She wanted to shop at luxury stores, spend the afternoons lounging at exclusive beach clubs, and dine at the most expensive restaurants. I went along with it at first, thinking, maybe this is her way of enjoying herself. But by the 3rd day, it started to feel less like a vacation and more like I was sponsoring her Instagram photo shoot. She'd pose in front of the skyline, take endless pictures of the cocktails, and spend half her time posting stories. The funny part? Most of those stories didn't even include me. It was about her lifestyle, her image, her brand, not us as a couple. On the 4th day, I suggested something different. I told her I wanted to spend a day exploring the city on foot, maybe find some local spots, try food off the beaten path. Something real, something just for us. She frowned like I'd ruined the mood and said, "That's not really my vibe. We're here to enjoy ourselves, right? Why are you being so cheap all of a sudden?" That word, cheap, hit me harder than I expected. It wasn't just a comment. It was a label she was stamping on me. For the first time, I felt reduced to nothing more than what I was willing to spend. Still, I swallowed it. I told myself not to overreact, that maybe I was being sensitive. But deep down, I knew something had shifted. That word lingered in my mind long after the trip ended, and it planted a question I couldn't shake. Was this really about us? Or was this about what I could give her? At the time, I didn't want to face the answer. But the cracks had become too wide to ignore. That word, cheap, echoed in my head for weeks after Miami. I'd never thought of myself that way. I've worked hard for everything I have. I'm not flashy, but I take pride in being stable, reliable. And yet here was someone who looked at me, not for who I was, but for how much I was willing to spend in the moment. I kept replaying it in my mind, trying to rationalize. Maybe she'd said it in frustration. Maybe she didn't mean it the way it sounded. But no matter how I twisted it, the truth sat there, heavy and undeniable. To Sophie, my worth was tied to my wallet. Life has a way of testing people at the worst possible time. Not long after that trip, a couple of unexpected expenses hit me all at once. Car repairs, some medical bills, and a few other things I couldn't put off. For the first time since we started dating, I realized I needed to cut back. One night, I told Sophie I'd have to scale down our outings for a while. I explained what was going on, expecting some understanding, maybe even a little support. After all, that's what partners do, right? They adjust when life throws curveballs. She didn't say much at first. She just went quiet, her expression unreadable. The silence stretched long enough that I started second-guessing whether I should have even brought it up. Later that night, as we sat in her living room, she finally spoke. Her tone was flat, almost cold. "If you can't take care of me, then what are we even doing here?" It felt like someone had punched the air out of my lungs. I remember staring at her, not even sure I'd heard her correctly. Not take care of us. Not work through this together. Just take care of me. Those 5 words rang in my head for days. They stripped away whatever illusions I had left. Suddenly, all those little moments I'd brushed aside, her questions about money, the way she rolled her eyes at my mom, the endless focus on appearances, they all clicked into place. It wasn't about us building something. It was about her being provided for. I wasn't her partner. I was her plan. The irony is, part of me still wanted to make excuses for her. I told myself she was just stressed, that maybe she didn't realize how harsh she sounded. But another part of me, stronger this time, knew better. That comment wasn't a slip of the tongue. It was the truth slipping out. I spent the next week in a fog, going through the motions of daily life, while that sentence replayed over and over. I thought about how much I'd given, not just money but time, energy, and trust. And what had I gotten in return? Conditional affection that depended on my ability to fund a lifestyle that wasn't even mine. For the first time, I started asking myself questions I'd avoided for months. If I lost everything tomorrow, would she still be here? If I stopped paying for the restaurants, the trips, the gifts, what would we have left? The answer scared me, because I already knew it. Her words stayed with me like a bruise that wouldn't fade. If you can't take care of me, then what are we even doing here? I tried to carry on like nothing had happened, but everything felt different after that night. Even the way she looked at me seemed to change, or maybe, for the first time, I was finally seeing it for what it really was. I found myself analyzing every moment, every exchange. The dinners, the vacations, the little treats she hinted at. It all took on a new meaning. I had been telling myself this was love expressed in gestures, that I was showing my care by providing. But really, I was funding her comfort, her lifestyle, her image. The more I thought about it, the more patterns emerged. When I was down or tired, she never adjusted to meet me halfway. When I had good news, she'd smile and congratulate me. But somehow the conversation always circled back to what we could do with it. Another trip, another purchase, another night out. It wasn't about sharing life. It was about upgrading hers. The hardest part to swallow was realizing how little of myself I'd been protecting. I had ignored my instincts for months, convincing myself that compromise was just part of being in love. But there's a difference between compromise and sacrifice, and I was the only one doing the sacrificing. What hurt most wasn't the money. It was the realization that if all of that stopped, the dinners, the gifts, the vacations, so would the relationship. Everything we had was conditional. It wasn't about me. It was about what I could provide. One night, I stayed awake long after Sophie had fallen asleep. She was lying next to me, peaceful, her phone still clutched in her hand from scrolling. I just lay there staring at the ceiling, the room quiet except for her breathing, and I asked myself, is this it? Is this what I want for the rest of my life? The answer came quickly, and it scared me with how clear it was. No. It wasn't the kind of no that leaves room for, but maybe if she changes, or if we just talk it out. It was the kind of no that sits in your chest, heavy and immovable. I realized then that I'd been holding on to the idea of Sophie more than the reality of her. I had built up this fantasy that she was the one, that if I just tried hard enough, if I just gave enough, eventually it would feel mutual. But all I had really done was put myself in debt to an illusion. In that moment, I finally admitted to myself something I'd been avoiding. Walking away wasn't a loss. Walking away was the only way to stop losing. Over the next few days, I started pulling back in small ways. Less eager to plan, less willing to spend, more focused on what I needed. And almost instantly, I saw how quickly her attitude shifted. She wasn't cruel or dramatic, just distant. Like the shine had worn off. That was when I knew, beyond doubt, that I wasn't her partner. I was her provider. And I couldn't do it anymore. The decision was made. Now I just had to find the courage to follow through. That was the moment I could no longer deny what I'd been avoiding. This wasn't love. It was a business arrangement where the currency was my wallet. The more I looked back, the clearer it became. The constant Instagram posts flaunting our outings, the way she dismissed my family, the fact that she never once offered to chip in, even for something as small as groceries or gas. It had been there the whole time, plain as day. I just hadn't wanted to see it. So I made the decision. Ending it wasn't easy. I cared for her, or at least I cared for the version of her I thought was real. But I knew if I stayed, I'd keep losing pieces of myself until there was nothing left. I remember sitting across from her one evening, my heart pounding, rehearsing the words in my head. She was scrolling on her phone, laughing at something one of her friends had posted. When I finally spoke, my voice came out steadier than I expected. I can't keep doing this, Sophie. This doesn't feel like a partnership. It feels like I'm just here to fund your life. And I can't live like that. She didn't cry. She didn't argue. She just set her phone down, looked at me for a moment, and said, "Fine. I'll find someone who appreciates me." That was it. No fight, no attempt to fix things, just a shrug, like I'd been fired from a job I didn't even realize I had. I walked out that night carrying nothing but my keys and my own disbelief. Part of me felt stupid, like I'd been blind for months. Another part of me felt oddly relieved, like a weight I'd been dragging finally slipped off my shoulders. The days after were brutal. I replayed every moment in my head, questioning myself. How had I missed the signs? Why did I ignore the doubts? I felt used, embarrassed, like I'd failed some basic test of judgment. But with time, the perspective shifted. Yes, I lost money, time, and trust. But I also gained something that will stick with me for the rest of my life. Clarity. Real love doesn't come with conditions or price tags. It doesn't demand proof in the form of receipts or vacations. Real love shows up when you're tired, when life throws you curveballs, when you can't take care of someone in the financial sense, but can still care for them in every other way. Sophie didn't love me. She loved the lifestyle I could provide. And once that lifestyle was in question, she was gone. And strangely enough, I'm grateful for that. Because losing her wasn't losing love, it was losing the illusion of it. And that's the best thing that could have happened to me. Now, when people joke about gold diggers, I don't laugh. I know how real it is, how easy it is to get caught up in the fantasy, and how painful it feels when reality finally hits. So that's my story. She told me, "If you can't take care of me, what's the point?" And I walked away, letting her find her next wallet. I'm still healing, but I know I'm better off for it. I appreciate you watching till the end. Hit that subscribe button and stay tuned for more content.